Okay, today's little video is going to be about. Why am I on eraser? Switch. Okay. Today's video is going to be about. It's a Bible overview, right, of the Bible. Like a basic overview, layman's overview of the Bible. Why am I doing this video? Because do a timeline again. I like timelines. I'm going to go a little lower in this one. Because when I first read the Bible a few years back, it was so confusing. I don't know what the heck's going on, and I'm going to do a little rant here about modern society and public education, public schools, which is where I got my where I education and public university. So this is where I got my education from. And they really don't want you to know things. Yeah. And I'm just going to have to go a little political. These things are all run by liberals. Okay? Think about it. It really is. They're all run by liberals. And liberals love government. And when they teach you things, they kind of, look at today's universities. They're teaching you sex week, which is like 10 days now. They want diversity. And I'm going to bust on this, an evolution. See, they're teaching diversity, right? Because of races. Right? Because they're Darwinian, right? They're evolution. And that's all about races, right? And remember, he was freaking racist. He was talking about savages. Hey, I wonder who the savages are. But see, in creation, we were all created 6,000 years ago, right? 6,000 years ago. So we don't have this this whole freaking inferior superior race thing. We do have cultures, right? We have cultures, and cultures are cool. Love cultures. And some cultures are better than others, that's for sure. But it's based on an ideology or belief, right? Of God or no God or whatever. But here, it's all about the DNA, right? And if you just have inferior DNA, well, you're just not worthy. You're chattel, right? You're cattle. You can be gotten rid of. So these guys are dealing with this in their little mindset, in their little foundation, and they got all this diversity crap, and they're all talking racism and stuff and BS, but it's all on this foundation, and they know it in their heart, It's digging in their souls. This hatred, that's the beginning foundation of what they even believe. Okay, so back to public education and public universities. Coffee break. They don't teach you like the Bible. The Bible has some of the best references to history. Actually, I'm going to move this up a little because I'm focusing on the Old Testament and the old stuff. So I'm going to move it up a little, or change it. So this is JC, and this is today. And this is 4000 BC. And I'm going to give you just a basic rundown of the Bible, so when you read it, you can get an understanding. So, like I said, the public education, they don't want you to know the names and dates and stuff that are in the Bible, because you would be all like, hey, that's freaking history. They change things. They use, there's some they just got to go with, but they sort of gloss over Assyria and Babylon. They just give you like one little paragraph on them, at the beginning of world history. And Egypt and all that. They don't want you to know the ancient history. Because if you knew the ancient history, you'd be like, oh yeah, the Bible's got all that. And you would be like, oh, okay, I get this. Alright, but anyway, let me just go through history here. And the timeline is I'm just gonna squeeze things around just to, so this is Noah's flood. I'm going to squeeze it over here just because, let me put the date, 2500, just because I want to fill in this area with the Bible. So the Bible has Genesis here, right? Creation. That's the first chapter of the Bible. and it's all about creation, and then it just has a little bit about what's going on from Adam to the flood. And this is like Conan time, Conan the Barbarian. If any of you have read Conan the Barbarian, that's kind of how I see this little time period here. I mean, it's very fantastical in a sense, right? And that's sad that we're ignoring evolution is destroying fantastical. Because this is all dinosaurs, lush jungles, violent, murderous people, and cults. And boy, that would be an awesome, wicked. I'm a new Christian, so like I'm all into zombies. I'm into Conan the Barbarian. I'm into all kinds of sort of erotic fantasy and blood and gore and all that. It doesn't bother me because the Bible has some of that. I'm not into gratuitous sex anymore because just whatever. But I'm totally into like hardcore medieval fighting and stuff and sword and sorcery. So yeah, this is sword and sorcery, man. Because this is like human sacrifices, all kinds of just murderous. And God, that's exactly why God ended it. And they knew about metals, maybe not steel. So they didn't have steel, but they certainly had all kinds of metal works, iron, bronze, all that stuff. All right. So after Noah starts off the new civilization here, now the Tower of Babel and Sumeria are right in there. I'm running out of room here. Sumeria is here. So what we're thinking is the Tower of Babel is just a pyramid. We got pyramids all over the freaking world. Okay? That's a ziggurat. Oh my god, I got the AC on. Jeez. Oh man. I'll see how that sounds. Okay. Ziggurat. Okay. So Tower of Babel is right here. And so what is it? Okay, so Noah lands. Okay, Genesis has all the weird stories, and Tower of Babel is part of that. Noah's part of that Tower of Babel, and Jacob and Esau are here. Abraham, when it starts off with the Jews, right? Abraham is here. Let me just do Abe. And guess who's named after Abraham? Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so this is like what, 2000? This is like 2100 BC, right here, 2100. Okay, so here's the interesting thing about Tower of Babel, and linguistics know this. Languages, there's no primitive language. Every language in the world is complete. Like you can say anything you want in that language. It has a full whatever they call it, and it's got, and they cannot figure out primitive languages. Like there's no caveman language or nothing. So there's no freaking prehistoric language. And they also found that the lineages of languages all sort of circle around the Middle East. They all kind of come from that area. Freaky. Also, and that's what happened here at the Tower of Babel, right? They got off of Noah's people. They stayed in the Sumeria area. They hung out there together, and they started building their pyramids to worship, to get up to God. And there's no Bible, man, so they don't know exactly how to worship God or whatever. But God wanted them to spread out and go across the world, right? He wanted to have dominion over the earth, and so he confused them, and he created all these different languages. And what we see, what we observe in reality, is that there are only like so many languages, the foundational languages, but they're all complete, and they all seem to swirl around the Middle East. Okay, so Tower of Babel. Abraham is here, which is when the start of like the Jewish promise of Israel and all that, and then he has some weird stories here. Oh, Jacob is in here. Jacob and Esau are in there, and they. I'm going through my little timeline here on the side just to reference. Okay, and what's cool is that in Jacob, Genesis 30, he's like really close to Abraham. But they get also on Noah's flood. Noah, and Noah is like 400 years old, and then their ages decrease because if you look at my other video about the creation, the atmosphere has changed, and so the UV ray lights are coming in, and they're getting younger and younger. So we're supposed to get to age about 120, but obviously that's not working today, but. That's supposedly the age we're supposed to be able to get to. Jacob is pretty cool, man. because in Genesis 30 he breeds different sheep, so there's that whole thing about we in creation, and the Bible certainly accepts that there's varieties and kinds. Okay, so as Jacob's there, and then we have, let me just go to 1500 just because I want to go backwards a little. Is Moses, okay? And this is Egypt, obviously, and yes, Egypt is around that time. So between Abraham and Moses is Jacob and Esau. Oh, and Joseph. Joseph is they have the robes of many colors, so he's like a nice guy. And this is the transition from the descendants of Abraham to Joseph to Moses. And then there's 400 years here. Joseph is when he shows God's kindness. This is sort of like a predecessor to Jesus and stuff, where he's so kind that he just, under slavery and all that he just keeps going up in the ranks and becomes second to the Pharaoh. And then the people of Abraham, for some reason, leave Israel, because Israel starts here, right under Jacob and all that. I think that Jacob's, or so one of the guys' names changes from Jacob to Israel, or not Jacob. Maybe it's Jacob. I don't know who it is. I forgot who becomes Israel. The name Israel, but that's the land of Israel is here, and that's the promise of God, is that land. But they have to leave because of a drought and something bad happening. I know, it's kind of weird, and they go to Egypt. So now so let's fast forward 400 years to Moses. Okay, so Moses does the Exodus. He does the floods, not the floods, splits the Red Sea. All the plagues is pretty cool, because they're all kind of weird, right? Frogs and darkness and all that, but they represent the different things in the Egyptian culture, like beauty. They had all the insects and pests, and that represented the beauty. They had the frogs, which represented wealth, because that frogs meant a lot of water and a lot of crops. So it's kind of interesting. The thing about the Bible too is the Bible actually says you need sermons. You need a pastor. You need to be taught by the rabbis, and it's true. You need to be given sermons to understand the context of the Bible, to then be able to read it. Because when I first read it, it was like Spanish to me. I was like, what the heck? I don't get. And then when they talk about lineages over back here, and Adam begat, that's kind of where I never could continue on in Genesis. Well, the lineages, the heritage is really not for everyone. It's when you're reading it, it's for the historians, so that they can get a timeline going. That's the only way you can do a timeline. There's no calendars back then when they started this, and when Moses started writing all this down in Genesis. So you have to do it in a begat way, and their ages. Okay, so after Moses in Egypt, and then they take the Jews out, and they got to return to Israel. That's what God told them, because they're sort of becoming pagan and forgetting about Him, and just enjoying their slavery life. And remember, their slavery life was like not the way we sort of today and look at slavery. It was more like they're just economy. They kind of liked the way how they're living, but then the pharaohs got more and more hardened, and anyway, so they had to leave. And the interesting story of Moses, and then let's just go to, they're in the desert now. And so that's Exodus, right? In the Bible, right? Exodus now. Okay. Let me underline the books: Exodus or Genesis, Exodus. I'm skipping through some, but anyway, Exodus, and then he's got. Now Moses supposedly wrote the first 5 books, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and that's his time in the desert, right? And then when they left Egypt, and they're all roaming around, and God's ticked off because they're such stubborn people, and he frees them, but then they get all annoyed and don't really worship Him that well. And so he writes Exodus, and then he writes Leviticus, which I love. It's all about the laws. Leviticus, and what's the other ones? Numbers, which is sort of doing a census of them all. And it's just really creating this culture of the Jewish culture and their laws and what they believe in and how they have to deal with things in Deuteronomy. I'm just going to go Deuto. And what was that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so 5, the Pentateuch or whatever it's called. The first 5 books are written by Moses, supposedly. And it's really about creating a culture. And it's interesting because there's different things there. There's things for craftsmen, there's things for a military, there's things for a republic. right? Moses' father-in-law is pretty cool. He comes in and Moses is trying to judge everyone, what their problems are, and then the father-in-law who loves God, he says, "Hey Moses, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't, delegate this out. Elect people to help you, and you can, have like it's a republic, in a way, because Moses is trying to like create this system or whatever, and that's sort of the beginning of the republic. That's even way before Greece, and just so you know, like Greece is supposedly the first democracy." But Moses writes this down in 1500. This sort of it's a democracy in the sense that each group of people elects their own little leaders that become a representative, a republic. Okay, so and guess what? The Jews were all in Greece around this time when the Greeks created their democracy. So they knew about the Jews and the way that Moses set up this republic. Anyway, so at least I think they do. So after Moses dies, and they finally get into Israel, there's Joshua, and he's got to go in and this is something that is around here, right? It's pretty close to Moses. Joshua, because Joshua worked with Moses and he was young, and then now he's become sort of the king, or really like the war chief or whatever. But they're going up against pagans, and these pagans are child sacrificers, and huge and sexualized and very. God doesn't say go and just kill these people. He says why. They're horrific, and God was long suffering in letting these people get away with this stuff. And they were like the Aztecs. They had a culture that was just horrific. And it's described they were very sexualized, even to their own family members, and they used sodomy to sort of gain power over their kids and their sons and their relatives or whatever. They punished them. Okay, so Joshua comes in and he's got to take them all out because it's been too much. It's been too long. There's a lot of hate and bloodlust in the whole culture, and Joshua cannot go around saving the kids. Okay, they barely can survive, and he's got to do it the right way, which is the brutal way. Okay, so Judges is next after Joshua's. Finally, they set up Israel, and it says. Joshua, when he's old, he says, "Look, you guys got to follow the laws of God if you want success. If you don't follow His laws, you're not going to have success. You're going to be suffering." So guess what happens? They stop following God and they become these guys. Okay, sexual pagans. And in Judges, they're all scattered. The Israel tribes. This is sort of a kingdom of Israel. And the judges are sort of like their mini little marshals or whatever. And there's a series of judges and all that. And they're trying to set up in Israel, but it just gets all whacked. Okay, so after Judges is Ruth. That's a kind of awesome little romantic story. It's in here, Ruth. But it's pretty cool. But it shows and Ruth is a pagan from this culture who comes in and just worship, and accepts God, loves God, and so it's not like they don't want foreigners. They just don't want foreigners' belief system. Okay. Then after that is Samuel, he's the dude. He's a prophet, and they start having prophets now, which is interesting because they go from God directly talking. I think God gets annoyed that he directly talks to them, and they don't like in Moses and stuff, and they don't freaking do the right thing anyways. And he goes from there to Judges and then to prophets. And so Samuel, he's the predecessor to David, and I'm going to go through this quickly now. Kings and Chronicles, which is basically this whole period right here. So, Kings and Chronicles and Samuel. Samuel's about King David, Saul and King David, right? Saul and David. And that's sort of a very Shakespearean. Well, Shakespeare got all his stuff from this because it's very Shakespearean. It's the Saul and David story. It's pretty amazing. Samuel 1 and 2, right? Do that, and then Kings 1 and 2. I think it's Samuel 1 and 2. Kings 1 and 2. Chronicles 1 and 2. It's interesting about Kings and Chronicles. Kings is basically the whole story from here to here, as from all the kings that are in Israel. So kings of Israel, and this is basically the lineage of history of Israel, of ancient Israel. And they mess up, man. They keep doing this. Child sacrifices. Some of them are good. And what's interesting too is that they find the Torah, the book of laws. Some of them do, and they start to kind of use that. And the prophets sort of reinvigorate once in a while. Oh, we got this books here. They forget, a generation will forget them, and then another generation will find it and go, "Wow, we've been sinning," and they bring it back, and it's pretty interesting. But the fall of Israel is because the last kings, man, they were this, and it was terrible. And so then Chronicles is interesting. Chronicles is written after the return of the Jews in this period right here, but it's written about this period. So it's just like a recap, which is cool because, see, that's the amazing thing about the Bible too, is that it has, for linguists, it actually explains, it helps because for linguists in translations, you want to have cross-referencing going on to understand different parts of the Bible and what they say, because cross-referencing really helps with translations. Because if you miss it up in this area, this will have like a reference to the same bit, and then you go, let me see what it says here about the same thing. So it's kind of cool, and it's about like different witnesses to the same event. So there's that, and then the prophet. Okay, so here's in the Bible. There's the prophets, which is all the names then after Chronicle. Well, sorry, let me add in. There's Psalms, Proverbs. Oh yeah, and then Solomon here, King David, Solomon the wise. He's in with these guys. This is getting messy. Proverbs, and there's some other books in there, and these are all like, these are prayers and songs, and Proverbs are wisdom, and those are written by Solomon and David in this period right here. It's getting messy. Okay, then after that in the Bible, the prophets. Oops, right here, prophets, which is all the names of the different prophets, the different books in the Bible, and those are like Ezra, Nehemiah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Joel, Amos, Obadiah. Those are all at the end of the Old Testament, and those all actually are prophets that are in these stories. Okay, so when you're reading them, there is a historical context to what they're saying, having to do with what's suffering and all the suffering that's going on here, and all this stupidity of the kings. So that's what the prophets are, and that's the end of the Old Testament. It's just a series of the prophets. Okay, and there's other stories in there. Obviously, there's Job, and Job actually, I believe, is right around. It's pretty cool because you can find the name references. He's right around here. Not Moses. I think he's in here. It's pretty cool. There's a name of his friends, and then you find a connection in Genesis of those names. It's pretty cool. But Job is like in there, and he's next to Psalms and Proverbs. But are you following this? Because this is crazy. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy is the first 5 books done by Moses. And then the history of Israel is Joshua, Samuel, who does Saul and David, Kings, which is Solomon. Well, I think he's in Samuel actually. The wise, David's son. Then Kings and Chronicles is the stories of all the kings, and then the prophets. And there's of course the extra little books, and there's a couple others too, Ecclesiastes and Job and all that. That's right in there between the prophets and the history. So this is like the history part, and then this is the prophets part. So that's really it. That's the 3 sort of sections of the Bible: is the Moses part, the history of Israel part, and the prophets part. And there's extra little things in between. And it's all the same God, which is pretty amazing. This dude right here. And now, in Prophets 2 is Daniel. He's sort of the end of the book, end of the history, and he's like in the lions, Daniel in the lions. But he's the one that sort of helps, along with Ezra and some others, helps rebuild Israel. And then from about 400 BC to Jesus, the Bible, the Torah's ended, the Old Testament, and we don't really hear much going on. Just whatever. Alexander the Great is here, and he opens up the roads, and Rome starts, and the world becomes much smaller at this point, where it's time for Jesus and the New Testament. And I'm not going to go on the New Testament, just the Old Testament, just to give you a rundown so you can understand the Bible. And this looks very clear to you, right? Oh yeah. So, yeah. God bless.